So we still have the question back there, I believe.
First of all, thanks very much for both of you being here. And I actually have a Raptors question. The last couple seasons have been a lot better, obviously. The last 15 games have been kind of rough for the Raptors, but it was a good victory on Wednesday. But from about 2002, the 02-03 season to about 05-06 was a pretty rough time.
Oh, great.
You know that it's rough when you're like marketing Banger Brothers T-shirts and things. But,
Robert Archibald, Lonnie Baxter.
That's right, Archibald, bleeding profusely. How could we forget? But I was just wondering, like the end of the Lenny Wilkins era and then the Kevin O'Neill era and the beginning of the Sam Mitchell era wasn't the best time. What was it like doing your jobs when probably the morale with the team wasn't so great? Just what was the atmosphere like and what was the gig like back then?
It's very difficult because you want to be fair and at the same time you got to be candid. So that's a fine line you walk. I mean, from an analyst perspective, your responsibility is to the fans. Your responsibility is to tell it like it is, and at the same time, be fair. So I think you don't have to be personal. You don't have to be vicious. You just got to tell it like it is in a way that people are going to be able to relate to what you're saying. And yet everyone's able to walk out of the building that night and everyone still has their dignity. Because it's just sports. I mean, this is not war and peace. We're not finding the cure for a disease. I mean, I think it's fun. I mean, it's sports. It's winning and losing. I think you learn a lot more about people through adversity than you do when things are going good. And, there were some things we found out about a lot of people over those years that weren't good. And you got to point out some of those things, but there has to be a balancing act. It's difficult. And obviously for Chuck, one of Chuck's greatest strengths is his enthusiasm. And it's hard being enthusiastic when the team's really bad. And I think he does a phenomenal job of being able to continue to keep you engaged in the telecast, even when it's a tough game. We did a game, Chuck, 2 weeks ago in Denver. That's about as bad a game as we've ever had to do in our 10 years together. I mean, the game was over in the first quarter. Maybe not, it was over like 5 minutes into the game. We had to talk for another. That was hard.
Yeah, it was hard. But one thing, I will say this. I've worked with a lot of people in my life, and Harry Carey, at least from a professional on-air standpoint, had a major impact because he broadcast Chicago Cubs baseball. And Cubs baseball in the early 80s, the 84 season was great, but it was an aberration. Because the next year they lost 3 starting pitchers in the month of June, and they went downhill quickly. But one thing I learned, Harry loved baseball, and Harry loved the big venue of knowing this is Major League Baseball, this is Wrigley Field. And he would come to the park every day. He would bring this huge scorebook, and Harry did his homework. Now, you would think Harry could just be a walking character. He didn't need to, but Harry would get up in the morning. Harry would, and this is in the days before the internet really came into vogue. I don't even think Harry knew what the internet, even the day he died in Palm Springs, California. Hey, what's this? A computer? I gotta get a bud. And so, but one thing, Harry did his homework. But he had great rapport with the players. Even the players that he would criticize, he still was man enough to show up on the ball field. He wouldn't rip them and then all of a sudden hide for a week. But one thing, Harry's enthusiasm was contagious, and that I'll always appreciate.
Question to both of you. Did Carter put in the work in workouts? And Chuck, who was your father figure since your dad passed away?
Okay, that's a good question. We'll answer that one first. Actually, my mother was the greatest inspiration in my whole life. That my faith in Jesus Christ. But my mother was unbelievable because she took 3 kids that were 11, 13, 9, and she really put it all together. And she made. And I'm not embarrassed to say this, but I grew up in an average size home, at that time 2,200 square foot home, and she was a school teacher at St. Louis School in Bellevue, and her salary was $6,500. And my father was a naval officer, and he died, and so she raised 3 kids. We moved out of the house into a 2-bedroom apartment. I slept out of a hide-a-bed with my middle sister. And to this day, you know what? If people say, would you change it all over again? No, I wouldn't. Because I grew up. You have to grow up. Jack lost his father when he was a young boy, too. And you have to grow up. And you either say, this is what I'm going to do, or you feel sorry for yourself. And there was no margin for pity. You just roll up your sleeves and you deal with it and you move on. So my mom, to this day, is the best.
You know, Chuck and I have talked about this a lot, and I lost my dad when I was 7. And when I speak still at a lot of basketball camps to young kids, and I always say the same thing at the end of every speech I've ever done. I always say, you never know what you have until you don't have it anymore. And I talk to kids about, you know, do you truly appreciate the people that do so much for you in your life and make the sacrifices necessary for you to have what you have? And I echo exactly what Chuck said, and I always say this. I have one. You know, people talk about heroes, Michael Jordan, this guy, that guy. I have one hero in my life, and that's my mom. She raised 4 kids in a little apartment building in Brooklyn, and I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing without everything she did for me. And I think a lot of times, again, in life, and you know, this is the game of life. As much as you can sit and write stuff in books, you know, a great line I learned one time is 10% in life is what happens to us. 90% is how we choose to deal with it. You know, we're all going to get knocked down. It's how you get up. And it's how you respond when you get up. And I think sports is a great lesson. It teaches us a lot of things. And they say sports build character. It also reveals it. And it's been a great experience being in it, because I think sports has taught me a lot of lessons, and I know it has with Chuck as well.
You know, there are some things that, as a parent now of 3 children, that you know, I reflect on how I've handled my children and whatnot, and at times I don't think I've done a very good job because I've provided for them probably a little bit too much and have spoiled them. Where I look at my world and say, you know, like okay, like in our house, and I'm probably showing a sign of my life that it was what it was, but we had dessert once a week. It was a big deal for our Sunday for my mom to make a cake or a pie. And we thought, great, ice cream, this is fantastic. We didn't have it every night. Well, now, like my kids, you know, they go to the refrigerator, they just pop in anything they want in terms of ice cream. They got snacks in the pantry, they got this, they got that. And I'm thinking, wow, what a different world. And I'm probably, you know, expressing a little bit where I was on one end of the spectrum, and I don't mean to do that, but it just shows you the different culture and the different lifestyle I grew up as a child compared to this generation. But the point is, don't take things for granted, as Jack mentioned. Cherish your relationships with your friends, with your parents, with your grandfolks, with everyone, because tomorrow is promised to no one. I was in Chicago, and Walter Payton was a football player. And the day I arrived in Chicago, at the age of 24, I was in the Bears locker room, almost in awe. Here's Walter Payton. I mean, Walter Payton. And I was scared to go, you know, other than all the reporters rushing with a microphone, I didn't have the guts to go up to him one-on-one because I put him on a different pedestal. And so finally, I got a chance to meet him. We had a very good professional relationship. We also had a personal relationship where he actually picked me up one day and took me to the Hill outside of Barrington, where he would go up the hill and show me what he did in the off season, where he would get in shape. And he asked me to join him, and I made about, you know, 50 yards. And okay, I'm going to watch. But he was this chiseled human being. I mean, he was unbelievable.
Like me.
And you know, like, and then all of a sudden he gets sick. He has pancreatic cancer, and he's gone. I mean, he weighed 88 pounds at the time of his death. Walter Payton. This is Walter. This is sweetness. This is a guy who, when he hit the hole and he hit a linebacker, there was a linebacker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Have you ever watched these old classic films? His name was Hardy Nickerson, and he played for Tampa. And we're at Soldier Field, and he hit him so hard when he lowered his shoulder and forearm, bam! And this is a middle linebacker in the NFL, okay? There was another linebacker, George Cumby of the Green Bay Packers. Bam! So when Walter Payton hit you, you felt it. And now, he's gone. So just, take one day at a time.